Hello, and welcome to Austin Opera's Live from Indy Terrace. Today we bring you a behind-the-scenes look at the most recently released production in our Sarah and Ernest Butler performance series, Vinkensport, or the Finch Opera. Vinkensport is a mockumentary-style opera about a finch sitting competition, and while much of it is outrageously hilarious, there are some stunningly relevant moments brought to life through the beautiful music and poignant text of David T. Little and Royce Fabric. These moments sneak up on you when you least expect it, so keep a box of tissues handy. This production also delivers on the promise of the Texas Opera Alliance. Announced just a few weeks ago, the Texas Opera Alliance is a formal alliance of the anchor opera institutions in the major cities of the Lone Star State: Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio. Vinkensport is a co-production of Houston Grand Opera and Austin Opera, a partnership made possible by the generous philanthropy of Sarah and Ernest Butler. It was produced in Houston by the wonderful team at HGO. It was directed by Loren Meeker, the wonderful general director of Opera San Antonio, and it was conducted by our very own Timothy Myers, the Sarah and Ernest Butler principal conductor and artistic advisor at Austin Opera. And I think the results of this powerful collaboration speak for themselves. After you watch today's behind-the-scenes conversation hosted by Timothy Myers, you will be fully prepared to enjoy Vinkensport. You can join us here in Austin at the Blue Starlite Drive-Ins next week to see the film, or you can go to Marquee TV, where it is available for free on HGO's channel. For more information on any of these viewing options, just head over to austinopera.org. Thanks for tuning in.
We're going to talk about a piece called Vinkensport, and this was a piece that was premiered in 2010. It was written by Royce Fabric, the librettist, and David T. Little, the composer, both at the top of their game right now, both very current, doing a lot of very important and prescient projects in the opera world, and both really exciting artists and people I've had the privilege to know. And Vinkensport is something that most of you are probably saying, what's a Vinkensport? Who, what, where? And Vinkensport is a traditional Flemish game of finch sitting, where the owners of the finches bring them and they sit socially distanced, and they tally ticks of when their birds tweet. And so it's a very interesting idea. Before getting to know the piece myself, I didn't really know much about it. The piece was composed in 2010 and premiered at Bard College in upstate New York as part of a triple bill, and has had a few productions since then. One of the exciting things about what we've done is that, as opposed to stage productions that it's had before, this version of Vinkensport was conceived entirely for the film medium by two people I'm about to introduce to you. Loren Meeker is someone who I've known for a very, very long time. We started out early on together, right when we were both finishing graduate school. We met and we had some gigs together and got to know each other. And it's been a really rewarding thing to know her throughout the career. And she has developed a career as a very, very prominent stage director at companies throughout America and Europe. And she is also now the general and artistic director of Opera San Antonio. So please welcome Loren Meeker.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Loren. I'm so happy to see you. Cheers. It feels like a while, even though we didn't wrap up Vinkensport that long ago, really, when we think about it. And I know you've been busy with some other projects, so thanks for taking time to be here with us tonight. My other guest tonight is a really, really wonderful artist with whom I had collaborated before, but not quite in this capacity. He had a really dual capacity in the Vinkensport project. Ryan McKinny is a really wonderful bass baritone with international engagements, whether that's at the Bayreuth Festival or singing the title role of Don Giovanni at Washington National Opera very recently in a production that Loren directed. But a really, really wonderful artist, and I can't wait to talk to him and kind of draw everybody into some of the other things he's going on. So please welcome Ryan McKinny.
Hey, friends. Nice to see you.
Ryan, nice to see you.
Cheers.
So you're in Atlanta, right?
I'm actually at home in North Carolina in Asheville, which is about, 4 hours drive maybe from where you are, Tim?
That's right. We're on opposite ends of the state. Let's keep it that way. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, we have pretty mountains over here, okay?
That's true. You do. Meaning mountains at all. Yes.
Well, yeah. But I have been in and out of Atlanta. And I actually go back later this week to work on some cool projects with them. They have live versions in a circus tent of Pagliacci and the Kaiser of Atlantis that I'm working on the film versions of. So that's another exciting project. But it's so nice to see the both of you again. It feels like it's been a long time, even though it really hasn't been. But I guess in 2020, like 2 weeks is 10 years. So that's just how
flying. Yeah, it's flying. And I don't want to step over that there's another person who is very important to the Vinkensport project, who is maybe to your right or your left.
Here.
Can we see Tanya? Hi, Tanya McKinney.
The famous Tanya McKinney.
It's so good to
right.
see you.
Who's one of the producers of Vinkensport.
That's right. One of the producers, and really from the very, very beginning involved with the concept, and also putting together, well, she did so many things on this project. I mean, not only she just kept us all on the rails, first of all, but, drone operator, psychological support, making sure we didn't forget to film anything, right? All of these really, really.
And we'll get into this, but Loren and Tanya and I spent hours and hours and hours sifting through this score, putting together what we thought should eventually end up, which actually mostly did end up in the final version visually. So
I would just like to say that it's phenomenal that our last night of filming was this group of people, and then here we are all reunited again.
Yeah,
it's really
that's
special.
Right.
Yeah, really
that's
special.
Right. Well, before we get into it, I do want to talk about some of those things. But before we do, I just want to show this trailer, Ryan, that you cut together. That just gives you a little bit of flavor, so you have a little context for what we're going to be talking about. So here's the trailer for Vinkensport. Amazing.
So
I get all the feels when I see that trailer, and I hear that music from the beginning of the piece. It's amazing.
Totally.
So so we all know it's 2020, hashtag 2020. But that we're artists who have worked, let's say it's probably fair to say, primarily in the classical arts, right? As of late, which a lot of has been completely interrupted and in a lot of ways decimated. And so I want to talk about, first of all, with the two of you, I came into this project when you were long down, conception, planning. I came in a little later on the curve. I just want to hear kind of the genesis of where did this idea come from? What happened? Could you just give me a little bit of a play-by-play of how this came to be?
Yeah, sure. Shall I jump in, Ryan?
Yeah,
I'll take it this time. So Really, it's like a COVID fever dream is how it really started. And it's stemming exactly from what you're talking about, Tim, which was me, both as a stage director and a general director, really panicking about the state of the industry and how can we survive. And the usual tips and tricks or production methods we would turn to are not viable. So what can we do? And I happened to have directed a staged production of Vinkensport several seasons ago for Boston University. And honestly, I haven't really thought much about it since that experience. So why I had this dream where all of a sudden that was in my brain, I don't know, but I think it means, your brain processes a lot while you're sleeping. And I literally woke up and thought, oh my goodness, David wrote this opera that you could absolutely do a staged version of or a movie version of, because these characters are socially distanced due to the rules of the sport. But I wasn't interested in doing something that was just a stage production or, keeping it within that realm. I really wanted to use what was at our fingertips to push the art form forward. And honestly, the first phone call I made was to Ryan. And it was because I had seen the work that he and Tanya were doing, starting at the very beginning of the pandemic in March. And this phone call wasn't until like May. So I watched what the McKinneys were doing with Keep the Music Going and how their video and film world was evolving. And Ryan, you asked me something a few weeks ago that was like, how did you know I'd be ready to do this? And the honest answer is I had no clue. No idea. I just was like, Ryan McKinney will figure it out. I'm calling Ryan. Ryan, and I figured he'll either be really excited about it or he won't. Maybe this is a great idea. Maybe it's not. And then really it just snowballed from there. We quickly got David and Royce involved and we put together a proposal and it was off and running.
That's amazing. So Ryan, jump in and also maybe kind of as you're tagging in on that, give us a little bit of history of what you had going on, what you and Tanya had begun doing.
Yeah, so I think a good sort of thing to understand is I grew up on movie sets. My dad was a director of photography on Beverly Hills 90210 and Perry Mason movies. And so I spent a lot of time around film and have been interested in it for a long time. I had been actually working on some projects trying to do vocal classical music, song cycles with film a couple of years ago. So I sort of had that primer in my head. But when everything got shut down, Tanya and I started this Keep the Music Going, which was basically like these essentially quite crappy iPhone videos.
They're not crappy.
They weren't crappy, but they were what we could do at the time, right? And everybody started doing similar things. But at the time, it was kind of radical to say, oh, this pianist friend of mine is going to record this track and I'm going to listen to it while I sing and then I'll edit it together. Even that was like, whoa, that's crazy that it could actually work to be interesting musically. And so we did a bunch of stuff and then they got funnier and more involved and with other people. And it was all to raise money for Agma Relief Fund and Artist Relief Tree. And then we started understanding that it was going to be a long time before we could go back to work. And I think Tanya and I really early on saw that writing on the wall when people were still hoping it was going to be a few months. And I was starting to think this is going to be, a year or more, who knows? And so my family, my brother and stepmother have a small production company here in North Carolina. So we actually moved back to North Carolina in part so that we could work with some of their equipment. We started doing some sort of test things right about the time Loren called. We had just done a couple of little things that I had shared with her. And she was like, oh, that's like kind of, it kind of matched with what she was thinking. And then I sort of was just saying yes to everything because I was like, oh, we got to make something happen. And so at first I was like, Vinkensport, I don't know, that sounds weird, but yes, let's do it.
Thank God you said yes.
What was cool was to then explore the score and the libretto and realize like, not only is this super fun, but it's like this really beautifully heartfelt piece. And we did this, which may end up in public at some point, but we did this little 4-minute sort of teaser of just the last aria. So it was just Tanya shot it, I sang in it. We did it like a block away in somebody's yard. We asked permission first.
We did.
with this drone that we had from doing other film stuff, and it was like, oh, this totally works. I can see what this is. And then we all started having these meetings, and it came together. And I think between Loren and Tanya and I, really early on, we knew exactly what this should be. And it's really neat to see something like that come to fruition in a way that's so close to what you imagine it to be. But it really is. And I think I can speak for all of us, and we'd say we're really proud of how that happened and where it ended up.
Yeah, it was really incredible coming into the project. And when I was contacted by HGO to do it, I immediately called Loren and I said, okay, you're going to have to get me up to speed really fast. And then we started a group text, with the four of us. But Loren sent me the pitch document that had that preview video in it. And I remember watching it because I didn't know the piece at all. I hadn't yet received, I had received a copy of the vocal score that I'd looked through before I agreed to do it, but I had not really learned the piece. And it was so touching. And I immediately fell in love with the range of the piece. And I thought the video that the two of you did there and, your neck of the woods was really, really beautiful.
We should also make sure, Tim, that we come back around to giving you mad props for how quickly you dove in. And I have always been in awe of your preparatory process and how amazingly facile you are at absorbing material and communicating that to the orchestra and also the singers. But what you had to do on this process was above and beyond. And we should just make sure we highlight that.
We should actually hang out on that for a second, because I know Tim gives himself credit, but yeah, I mean, the challenge for everybody in this, but particularly musically, is that we're essentially making an entire new genre of thing. Like, the processes that we had in place as a regular opera production in the before times almost don't apply at all to what we did. So Tim had to have time with the orchestra without the singers and figure out exactly, separately had rehearsals with singers and had to figure out how to weave those things together and record the orchestra first, and then was there when we were filming, helping the singers stay in connection with the orchestra track. And it was very wild, and we couldn't have done it without you. It was amazing. You were fantastic.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. It's always great to come back to a group of collaborators, and really, there's already chemistry, and we already have, some years under the belt, which is great. But thank you. I appreciate that. I want to pick up on something that you said there, Ryan, is let's talk about what this actually is, because I think even when it was premiered, there are a lot of people thinking that they were going to see a capture of a stage performance.
Or they lip sync, which is also not true.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And so this is really important for us to talk about, because early on, when a lot of people started pivoting to digital content, it was re-releasing from an archive, right? And a lot of this was, I know I speak, for a lot of people, we wanted to provide something to our patrons and our audience and our community. It was uplifting and that connected to the arm. And so we were just really trying to put things out there that were really thoughtful, but we didn't have a library, like a catalog of things like Vinkensport, right? So let's talk a little bit about what Vinkensport actually is and how this is a departure from what a lot of what has been produced before and what a lot of people were expecting. Loren, maybe you want to start us out on that, and then we can segue to Ryan.
Yeah, I'll start with the generals of how it's different, and then let the McKinneys talk about how it came to life from there. So I never envisioned this as a stage captured production. Right from the get-go, when Ryan and I were talking, we thought in film terms and movie terms, which even now I think is difficult for the opera world to conceive of. And so we went on a big journey with HGO, who backed the project really early on, and on figuring out how to develop a vocabulary that would really allow us to film this. And so that created an entirely different entity for rehearsing, for capturing, for filming days in order to bring this world to life. And there are some similarities, in terms of musical preparation or, working with the pianist before we had the orchestra track ready. But in many other ways, it was entirely different due to the film aspect and the COVID health and safety regulations. So I think it was the very first day of rehearsal, we had everybody in the room, but of course masked and separated in plastic bubbles, for lack of a better word.
And I'm going to interrupt you there. Melissa, can we put up we've got a couple pictures of that. Like, we've got a couple images. So while you're talking, Loren,
we tried to document it. Yeah, there you can see that's what our first day was. But never again did we do that in the rehearsal room. That was the only day where we had that many people together, and every other day was an individual rehearsal session. And we didn't see most people until there was one little mini music rehearsal at the very end of the capture process where like 4 of the 6 people were back together. But we had to develop this other vocabulary to be health and safety conscious, constantly wearing masks and keeping people distanced and sanitized and all that good stuff. But what that then also did, thank God for the McKinneys, is allow us to bring Ryan and Tanya's equipment into the room so that we could actually start using the rehearsal process, which was really important to Ryan, and I'll let him take over in a second. We could start using the rehearsal process to actually teach the singers and ourselves what the film was going to feel like on the days when we were capturing outside on location as opposed to on stage. So Ryan, maybe you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Let me just go back a step for why we wanted to do it this way. I think, Loren and I think, and Tanya too, are on the same page about, I think that archive performances are lovely. They're a really nice way to remember something, kind of like a photograph is a record of a memory, but it's not the experience itself, right? If you have a picture of a wedding, that's not a wedding. And so in an archive performance, you're sort of a third party, right? You're watching an experience between an audience and performers, but you're not really the audience anymore. Now, with film, the filmmaker is thinking of the person who is watching the screen as the audience. So there's direct interaction between what's happening on screen and the audience themselves. And that was of interest to me. If we're going to go this route of not having live performances, let's use what's really there to tell the story in a new way. And so in terms of these rehearsals, I really, the phrase in like film school is the camera as protagonist, right? So the camera itself is part of the story. And so we had to learn what that meant for each scene. And if you watch it, there's a lot of times where there's really specific choices made in terms of, okay, this is handheld shot. Okay, this one's on a gimbal. Now in this shot, like with Nicole, for example, we did this really cool effect where the camera on the gimbal sort of like leans to the side, and it, because she's drunk, and it's this kind of funny like thing that adds to the scene, right? Instead of
you rehearsing that scene. Yeah,
exactly, right here. So, I think that was a big part of the process, was exploring all the ways we could use this medium to tell the story in a deeper way, and let go of the things that we're used to as stage ideas, both from a literal staging standpoint and also from a storytelling standpoint, and really go with film as a genre, as a way of, and nobody knew, I actually don't think this really exists somewhere else. I mean, there's some opera, this is another thing, lip syncing you brought up. There are some other opera films out there, almost 99% of the time, actually, I think probably 100% of the time, they're lip synced. So they record in a studio ahead of time. And then as they film these people, the singer has to listen to themselves and try to match that. And famously, the movie version of Les Mis, they did differently, more like what we did, where the singing is happening on camera. Now, lucky for us, we actually have like super professional, amazing opera singers. I'm getting into all that. But so to me, a lip sync performance, it's not so much that the mouth doesn't match the music sometimes. That I can get over. But what happens is a person who is singing is then focused on matching that sound and is not actually embodying a character or making choices as a musician. So what I loved about this process is that we had a lot of freedom available to these singers to improvise in the moment, both physically and vocally within the boundaries of this orchestra track. But so what you see when you watch this movie is really their performance in the moment. It is not overdubbed. It's not lip synced. That's really what they're doing right there. And I think it really comes across in terms of the depth of the characters.
Also, sorry. I'll say one other thing just to tag into, and we can talk more about this later, but the film medium also allows us to explore backstory or other sides of a character in a way that's very different than potentially what you can do on stage.
Yes.
And Ryan was really quick when we were starting our initial conversations to say, I think there's the opportunity to actually show or explore a lot of the story and see it in real time as members of the cast are singing about it, as opposed to just focused on what the character is singing in the main shot of the competition. And that was this whole other world that made doing it as a film, I think, even more vibrant.
Yeah, we are going to get there, and I've got a good example of that we're going to queue up in just a minute. But I just want to kind of touch back on a couple of things. What we're talking about is, the key difference is this is a product that was built for digital consumption entirely, right? Yeah. This will never, this version of Vinkensport will always be that. And that was the way you guys designed it. And that when the three of you were having long phone conversations, developing a shot list. And what was incredible to me watching the three of you work together was there was a really unified vision, and not just a unified vision, but a moment by moment vision for every second of the piece when we were out there filming. And that was really remarkable. And what I love that I have to say, we had an incredible cast.
Yeah.
And they were all impeccably prepared, which wouldn't have worked otherwise, right? Because maybe we can hit just a little bit on the difference between acting for a 2,500 seat theater and acting for a camera. And Ryan, you had a camera in the room all the time, rehearsing so people could get sort of instant feedback. I thought they all did exceptionally well adapting to that.
I think that was really important to have that camera in the room, because what we could do is show them what we had just taken and really point out when there's moments, that they're thinking on a big stage. And it happened a lot. And it also happened with Loren and I in our direction of like, we start to stage a moment and then we'd be like, wait a minute, we could do a whole other thing here. We don't have to have this big thing. We could have something just with your eyes that would play just as funny. And so for a lot of them, there's a really good example is that we had you be the quote unquote interviewer, right? So in a regular opera performance, maybe everybody doesn't know this, but often what you'll see is that if I'm singing to this character over here and the conductor's over there, and you kind of just do that with your eyes from 100 yards away, that's not a big deal. But if the camera is this close, it's real obvious if I just do that, right? Like that's
right.
Pretty clear. So we would help them with that and say, look, if this is a moment you really need the conductor, stare straight at Tim and make him, you're telling this story to him. And I think once everybody got that in their heads, it was really, it kind of clicked for everyone. And they all did. They were all fantastic. And they're all really smart people and good actors anyway. And so it was just understanding what the new sort of format was. And they latched onto it right away.
They did. And there were so many other things that we had to discuss, even in the context of vocal production, right? And in a theater, we would have to think about, okay, so a lot of the job is being heard, right? And when you've got a microphone, here, right? And there's a pre-recorded orchestra track, and we'll talk about the Orchestra Capture in just a minute, but there is no balance issue at all.
Right.
And the other thing we don't have to do is a lot of times in a large theater, a singer, they're projecting tone and they're focusing a vowel to project that tone over the orchestra. But also, in order to make the text heard, there have to be a lot of consonants happening.
Yeah.
Whereas if we did that in this version, it would sound completely ludicrous. Just because you can actually say a word normally. They opened up saying tick, tick, tally. Well, we don't need tick, tick, tally, which is something we might do in a theater. Tick, tick, tally, and we immediately understand what's going on. There were some great moments. I'll talk about the Orchestra Capture for a minute, because this was also something that was really different. I feel like this project for me was a collision of things I've been in or around before. I've done some work in film, and I've done a fair amount of studio recording, and of course, hundreds of live performances. But this was really a collision of all of those things. And because of the way we decided to do it, that we were actually tracking vocals as part of the live performance on camera, on location, the orchestra had to be pre-recorded. And this is a really challenging thing. I was extraordinarily nervous about this because one of the things I thrive on in conducting is the actual live collaboration, right? In that moment, I think what we do in live performance is we create miracles, right? These are moments that have never existed before and will never exist again. We could go back and play the same phrase or the same aria and it would be completely different. And so that's one of my greatest passions as a performer, is that connection, and with the orchestra and the singers and the chorus, putting this all together in the audience and feeling the energy of the audience. So it was daunting, I'll say. And you can see some images here because of the HGO had incredible COVID protocols. We were tested weekly. You were assigned a zone in the building, depending on where you were supposed to be for a rehearsal, and you didn't go to another part of the building. And so they were really phenomenal with that. But you can see here, this is a giant room where, like an orchestra of 80 normally rehearses. Yeah. And you can see this is a small ensemble of 9. And so you can see how spread out everyone is because of distancing required to keep everyone safe. The string players were wearing masks. The wind players, of course, were not able to, but they were distanced further, and there was various screening just to keep everyone safe. But it was a tricky thing, and I was really grateful for the orchestra and the way they came in. First of all, this was late September, mid to late September, and so none of them had played together as an ensemble for over 6 months. That's huge, right there, to jump back in, because being an orchestral musician it's an athletic thing, right? It requires, there's technique, there's stamina, all of these things, and so they came in really ready to go and really worked hard. It took us quite a while to figure out how to capture a sound of where you're all playing together, where there's many more times distance than what you have ever encountered before. And that was very tricky, but they did a really incredible job. Maybe, Melissa, we can go back to one of those pics of the orchestra. Yeah, so you can just see that's just a few of it there. And then at the very back, we have, the production team is also in the room capturing. And so that was something that was really tricky to do, because me deciding tempo, I'm used to in the moment looking at a singer on the stage and saying like, okay, this is going really well. Or sometimes, I'm reacting when a singer, maybe they needed a little help in a phrase to move along, or they need a little more time in a phrase, or a lot of times the audience will never know, but I might know that singer is not feeling 100% that day. And so there's this normal chemistry, and that was really it was hard to go in and do that and lay it down. But we had some rehearsals with the cast, especially you saw the one where they were all in their own little unit, where we were able to put it together and really get a shape of the piece. And then we went and filmed where?
In
Ireland.
In Ireland.
Yeah.
All Tanya. Tanya gets the hats off for that.
Yes, Tanya, tell us about the location scouting and recruitment there. Yeah.
Well, Ryan and I have traveled for his whole career together, and with our 2 kids. And so we are Airbnb experienced. And when you were going to Houston, and we were, of course, coming too, because we don't want to spend any time without him, and I wanted to be involved as much as I could still with this production, we started looking at probable places we would stay. But with Loren, we had talked about the shots, you know, to measure by measure, moment to moment. And we knew we wanted Nicole's character to be wealthy enough to have, you know, extra things that other people might not have, including a pool that she might in at some point. And so we started thinking, how can we get a pool in Houston? There's lots of people who have one. Maybe a donor would let us be at their pool. We weren't sure. And we were like, oh, but COVID. And so we were like, what if our Airbnb has a pool? And so we just found one.
Well, and we didn't have a main location yet for we needed something with a large outdoor space. And it came sort of in that time period where we thought maybe we could find something.
Yeah, we're talking like Sam Houston
everything
Park,
all together.
Memorial Park. Where can we be that's not too noisy? Where can we be that we can really control the outside space? And so this specific Airbnb was perfect. And the owner happened to be a classical music fan and was totally interested in our fun. And so, yeah, it just worked out. HDO went and did a sound scouting of it to make sure that it wasn't too noisy.
Of course, they didn't go on the days that we had like everyone mowing their lawn, right?
Motorbike.
We should tell that story real quick.
So that was the first time we were trying the drone shot, and wasn't it? Yeah. And honest to goodness, this kid was testing out his dirt bike on a track that apparently is just right across the bayou from the house we were on location at. And I literally handed Daniel James, who was working with us from HGO, I handed him some cash, and we were like, go see if that will help the kid like stop for the evening. Daniel James is like sprinting across the dirt track in the field.
That was a loud motorbike, yeah.
Really loud motorbike. And we were like, really? With a drone shot and Ryan singing, and this is not going to go well. And we watched the kid from very, very far on the other side of the track go, yes, when the money came out, and we were like, okay. Yeah. That took care for the evening.
That bought him a lot of tanks of gas for that motorbike. Yeah. Well, Melissa, we've got a couple pictures from on set in a backyard in Meyerland here that we can just take a peek to give people some context. Wow. So this is what we're talking about. So this is a good shot where you can see, so that's me in the ball cap there and the shorts, of course, looking, I've never conducted and wearing that before. But so you can see to my right, there's a camera, and that's the camera that Ryan was mentioning. So if I'm sitting really in the position of the interviewer, and then there was the other angle that's further to my right, and then what you'll see in the film, or you even saw in the trailer, is there's a third shot, and that is from the Finch box that's below the cast member. Let's go to the next one, Melissa. I think there's couple more here that give you a little scope. Yeah, there you go. So this is a basic setup, and this moved around depending on light, time of day, who we were filming, et cetera, et cetera.
Maybe it's good to jump into, I don't know if we explained, but like this, the libretto lends itself to, you know, what people talk about the mockumentary style, right? Christopher Guest, like Best in Show. And so our whole conceit was that each of the monologues from the characters was happening in an interview situation, as if this competition were happening and a documentary crew came to film them. So then you have this sort of B-roll, which is the behind the scenes, like in their live shots. And when they're singing, it's this sort of what we called on set the interview shots.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for clarifying that. And this is a good shot of you, Ryan, looking at the monitor from where you and Tanya and Loren would be watching the actual performances on set. And if for anyone, the Christopher Guest reference, if you've seen things like Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, all really, really brilliant films that are incredibly cast and some of my favorites. But you also, Ryan, mentioned B-roll. So let's talk a little bit about, and Loren, you touched on this earlier about this is what we don't have the opportunity to do in a traditional stage performance, is to have an entirely different storyline going, or subtext, or something that's illuminating something else, or it's a really incredible device that we have in the film medium that we don't traditionally have. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, you can do it in some senses in staged version, but it usually requires an entirely different set and, lots more to the concept and a bigger production. Now, not that this wasn't challenging to put together, but because the brilliant Tanya McKinney stumbled across this house that had all of these environments where we could do not only the main competition shot, but the B-roll, that blew open the vocabulary to be able to tell more of the story, I think, more effectively. Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about explaining B-roll and what that means?
Yeah, so it first came up, I think, when we did the original 4-minute thing, and we were thinking about, I'll try not to give too much away, but part of the final scene with my character is this sort of melancholic aria to the bird, which is this character's friend, and we were trying to figure out why would he have this interaction with this bird? What happened? This is stuff that we as actors and singers go through all the time, right? What's my backstory? Where did I come from? What has happened to me in the past? And that's always interesting for you to have in your mind on stage, but we have the opportunity in film to actually go into your mind. And so we had a couple of these little just snippets of shots that tell a huge story just from a few seconds. And so to me, that's really interesting. And it's why actually different from if you did that on stage, you'd have to do a whole scene, right? But this is like
right.
3 seconds of just one image that totally shifts the way the text reads. And that was true for a lot of people. We had, actually, Tanya pushed one of the storylines, which I won't tell you about now. Well, 2 of them really, but that end up being totally outrageous, but work with the text. And that just little bit of you're watching somebody sing and then you go into their mind and see what they're remembering or see what they're thinking or fantasizing about is a really cool device that gives a lot of texture and depth to these stories.
We've got a good example of this, and this one is not giving anything away for people who haven't seen the film. It's direct. Well, it is, of course, because it's a clip, but this one, it comes from the libretto, and this is Elena's B-roll. So this is a character who she's the trainer of a bird named Farinelli, which is a very funny name, of course, because it was a very famous Italian castrato. And so Farinelli is her bird, and she makes an admission here about what's actually going on with Farinelli. And there's brilliant B-roll. So we're actually going to watch a couple minutes of it because this is one of my favorite things. So this is a B-roll clip that will really, while she's singing, you kind of hear all of this, but you actually see all of it happening too. It's really amazing. Here you go.
Let me level with you. Farinelli died years ago. I woke up one morning, found him at the bottom of his cage, on his back, in a quasi-fetal position. I poked him with the spatula to make sure he wasn't sleeping. But he was as dead as they get, so I scooped him up, balancing his little carcass on the flat of the spatula as I walked down the hall. Didn't drop him once, a one-man processional to the bathroom, flushing him like so many a goldfish and newt before. This fine creature with his
So first of all, it's so amazing. And Elena Villalon, so first of all, so her parents live in Austin, so she's from the area. She will be doing her first Susanna in The Marriage of Figaro next autumn with us in Austin. She's an incredible singer, an incredible actress. But I mean, how brilliant, right? So tell us about making that shot.
Yeah, well, that kind of goes against what I was just saying, because we literally just showed what she says, but it's so funny that
right.
it makes sense. And yeah, well, except for it didn't drop him once and then she drops him. But I have a GoPro and it's waterproof. And so when we were talking about the scene, I was like, well, I should start by saying we didn't want any birds in this. We didn't want to actually have a prop bird. We didn't want to have a real bird. So the conceit that we made is that we will often see the action from the bird's point of view. So that's why you see the shots from inside the bird box. Later on, there's a drone shot of a bird flying. And in this scene, even though the bird's dead and it doesn't make sense that the bird can see, I know, it's fine. I mean, nasty email about it. We decided that it would be fun to let the GoPro be the bird. So we literally just put the GoPro in the bird cage. Elena does the rest, scoops it up with, the spatula and dumps it in the toilet and flushes it down. Oh, and I did a test of it and it was very funny and I was happy with it, except as soon as I flushed it, it started going down the toilet. I had to reach in and grab it. And you hear at the end of the clip me yelling, no. Yeah. But we figured out a way around that for the final version. So it was all good.
It's amazing. But this is a great example because now we're going to watch a clip of an actual, a couple of minutes from near the beginning of the piece where you see a more direct performance, right? So this is what you traditionally see or expect to see, that's more into a camera. And I love this clip. We get to know a few of the characters here, including your character, Ryan Atticus Finch. So in case I wasn't clear about this, Ryan not only co-directed the piece, but also sang one of the roles, the role of Atticus Finch, and really, really beautifully. So this is, I love this clip because you really get to know a couple of the characters right away and really quickly get to know their feelings about Finch sitting and what they're doing. So let's see this clip.
I'd rather sock my foot than be here with these people ticking and tallying traits from stupid birds. I'd rather amputate my right foot than count how many times Mr. Finch here sings.
Got up early to put it in colors and did my makeup too. Never do makeup. I hope he notices me.
It goes back a long time, created by men with great foresight, immortalized by that great poet, Mr. Hardy, who hopeth and doeth all things, who thinketh no evil but sings, who is divine. This bird is divine. The mercy of one of opera divas, feathered friends with blue-gray caps, and the mercy of the hour of sport, Vinkensport.
It's Elton John,
I love it. You just get to know so much about the characters. I think that's one of the things that Royce and David do so brilliantly in this piece, is the character development is really clear, and you feel like you get pretty immediate contact with the characters and who they are and what they're about. I want to do another clip here. I'm just showing this because it's some of my favorite music in the thing, but it's also a great example of how brilliant David and Royce are at combining storylines. So one of the things they do so incredibly in the pieces, they accomplish this range that, first of all, I think to write a 40 to 45-minute piece is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
I think it's probably easier to write a 2-hour opera, right? But to have concision and the ability to make transitions quickly and effectively that don't feel truncated, and I think they're both gifted at doing that. And this is a really great clip where we hear where there's a combination of two of the characters. So even though these are parallel storylines happening, they're not even sitting next to each other at the competition, but we get to know these storylines, and then they're joined together through text and music in this really, really beautiful moment. So Melissa, let's watch that clip 4, please.
One more time for my father. In my own home. Waiting for an apology that's not going to come. I'm expecting at any moment for him to arrive at the front door. I'm expecting at any moment for him to arrive at the front
Yeah.
I love that scene so much, and the way those storylines come together. A couple more clips, and then we're getting a lot of questions, so we're going to have a little Q&A. But I do want to play a clip. There's a character named Hans Sachs, and that's all I'm going to say about this. So this is a clip from towards the end, and the first person to comment on this, to do a live comment and guess what this excerpt is from, or what this musical quote is from, I will send you an Austin Opera wine tumbler. So here it is.
And I
You ready to comment?
I guess.
Yeah, you can. No, you work for the business. You can't participate.
at the mercy of tick, 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 time.
know if anybody's guessed that yet. Somebody will jump in and tell me. But a great quote of the big theme from Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg of Wagner.
Tim himself the wine tumbler.
No, wine tumbler.
Yeah, right. Yes, another one. Great. Well, we do have one more clip, but I'm going to hold that until the end because we have this funny little blooper reel that we're going to watch. But I want to do that at the very end because we have some questions coming in that I want to make sure we have time to address. I'm going to go back and do them in order they came in. So the first question, though, this was when we were talking about the orchestra capture. How difficult was it to have a musical relationship between players being so spread out? The answer is very. It was very difficult. We actually used headphones as if I handled it very much like a studio recording. And so we had headphone feeds for all of the players because of the distance. Playing this kind of piece is very difficult. In a larger orchestra, it's almost easier to have it because there's enough sound going on and you can sort of latch onto the sound and get into it. But with a more of a chamber orchestra like this, it's tricky because you're trying to hear something and connect to something as a player. And when that's something you're trying to connect to, which on stage in an orchestra might be 15 feet away from you and it now is 28 feet away from you, that's really, really challenging. So it was difficult, but the players were really incredible about it. And we figured out different ways of communicating, and it really brought an interesting focus to it. The next, we've got, these are both about the production process. So there are two separate questions here. The first one is, how long was the production period? And I think if we think about, let's separate pre-production, so all the months of work y'all did before we got there, and all of the wonderful people, at HGO and the producing department did. But from, let's say, arrival to wrap, how long was that?
2 weeks.
Was that like about 2.5 weeks or so?
I think it was 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. Very tight. I mean, just so everybody understands, like, whether this was an opera or it was a film, for either one of those things, this was a very, very short schedule. And so doing these things together made it even crazier. And then, I think actually probably the next question was going to be about post-production, which I saw too. But
That's right.
Basically 2 weeks
Yep.
to edit it, which Ben Doyle did along with help from Loren and Tanya and I, and Tim on the sound side with Ryan Edwards. And so everybody was like full steam ahead that whole time. So we really needed every single day of it.
Well,
we
into
did
the
it.
evenings. Like at midnight,
late,
when
there
the
was,
you would get emails.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't even just, this particular group of people working on the editing process. I mean, all of us had already moved on to the next job. I was directing Impresario. Ryan had gone off to Atlanta. You'd gone home to North Carolina. And the same was true for the editors, both in film and sound. So it was really around the clock adventure for those pieces of editing.
Yeah. And thankfully we have great technology where this could, there would be a version and we could all know that it was coming and watch it and make notes, and everybody was really on top of it. But it's certainly an all hands on deck. I mean, to film something, and we only actually filmed, not including B-roll, but with the cast, which, by the way, we never filmed with more than one cast member at a time. That's also something important to understand from the COVID standpoint, is that there was only one person there. And of course, when they were singing on set, everyone else was masked.
Except for Richard Beto, who should give props to being the most fabulous and maybe now famous, I would like to think, chorus conductor.
I mean, Richard Beto was already one of the most famous, musicians and chorus masters in the world. Now stepping in and playing this role of the butler / referee, which was phenomenal.
The amount of trust that he had to have in all of us to do what we asked him to do is pretty amazing.
Richard, I think, is the pinnacle of all things music and acting, as far as I'm concerned.
And you know what? He found out he looks amazing in a seersucker suit.
Totally. He does.
I mean, it's so dapper, incredible.
Yeah. He owns it.
We have another question, and this is, do you think this paves the way for more filmed operas, especially for the near future? Go.
Yes.
So we're already talking about other projects, but
yeah, I mean, we officially have projects coming up with several opera companies, none of which I can announce right this second, but 4 or 5 this season that you'll be able to see. And then this team here is also brainstorming several projects together that I think are very likely to come to fruition. I think we've all, of this team especially, have all agreed that this is not a stopgap measure. We're not interested in just passing time doing this. This is something that is valuable in and of itself. It's an entirely new genre that can have a life even when we're back in the theater. And I think live performance is amazing and wonderful, and I love it. And it's its own thing. And then this is its own thing too. And I think that there's a place for it for sure. Agreed.
Loren, what say you?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, if we were still in the waters of a live capture performance or in something that really wasn't pushing the industry forward into new artistic territory, then yeah, okay, sure, maybe that disappears when we get back into live performance. But the work that this group in particular is interested in doing is forging new frontiers. And I feel like the gauntlet's been thrown. We put this out there and somebody will level up beyond us, and then we're going to come back swinging with our other projects. And if that's how our art form grows and moves forward, sign me up. I'm on board.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's so wonderful to be involved in this. And if I then, also with my Austin Opera hat on, we've got an upcoming film project that was actually something that was meant to be a live performance happening in the spring that we pivoted into a film project much like this, actually, purpose built for film that'll be really exciting coming out, and lots of good things in the hopper from a lot of people. And it's exciting to see this level of creativity. And like both of you say, this doesn't mean that it's replacing anything. This is an increase of scope and an increase of reach and an increase of accessibility that is really, really exciting.
I think it's interesting to think of it in terms of, I was saying this to somebody else today, like people in the live theater world thought when television and movies came along that would be the end of live theater. And of course, that's not the case, that there's amazing live theater happening all over the world all the time. I think in the opera world, we have not even begun to tap this other version of our art form. And I think that it absolutely has a place there's no replacement issue. It's a totally different thing. And hopefully it will draw people into the live performances as well.
Yes, and with a lot of technology now, it's really incredible. More and more what we're able to do in these mediums is really phenomenal. So just to let people know where and when to see it. So the film is actually already premiered. It premiered last Friday night on Marquee TV. And so you can see it there for free from 30 days. But really, if you're in Austin, what we want you to do is come to a Blue Starlite Drive-In theater on November 8th or 11th and see a screening there. So it's a great environment. I will be there for the November 8th. Loren, I think you're going to join us. Maybe we'll convince the McKinneys to sneak down. But this is also a really cool environment. So be sure to visit us there, and we really want to see you there. And you can find all those details at austinopera.org. Or if you're not able to go and see it there, please do go to Marquee TV, where it's available free for 30 days from last Friday. Yeah. So we do have a fun little super that we want to show you on the way out. Let's have a look at that.
Go for it, Elena.
Elena, you okay? That's all I
Cut.
I don't work out that often.
Sorry, I laughed. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
It's on his breath.
Okay, good. Oh my God. So you can have more Buc-ee's. You can do weird tongue stuff with Buc-ee's. You can do chalk things. Dude, because that's, yeah, your reaction to it's way better than.
Does she turn the iPhone? Like to look at it from a different angle?
Yes.
There's like different dogs, wolves, you know, different variations of that. Oh, and then there's like the crow, like, or whatever.
Do you try like a sheep bleeding kind of thing? Just curious. Yeah. I can't remember.
Ready, Freddie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hang on. I don't know what bodies are heavy.
Yep. Let's, yes. It's a patriotic moment.
Yes.
That's it.
Forgot I had my glasses on.
Amazing.
So happy to watch
Just
that.
in case anybody wasn't clear, like the person whose feet are coming in and out of the frame is our own E. Loren Meeker.
Yes.
I like that from this clip we learned that I don't work out. And that bodies are heavy to be dragging around.
I think Loren was calling me fat, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh
and Ryan wears Converse sneakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chucks. Yep.
Oh my gosh. And clearly none of us like each other or
No
enjoy
fun
working
was
together or have any fun.
Oh, there was no fun that was had on this.
Very serious all the time.
But actually, I mean, that's sort of what makes this particular project so awesome to have produced is the fact that it's short, it's in English, it's a comedy. The team here tonight and the cast, we had such a fabulous time despite the crazy pandemic world that we find ourselves in. And that's really a gift. It really is.
Absolutely. It really is. Yeah, that's a great way to tie it up is you know, we do this because we have to, and it's really it's in our souls. And I just want to thank the three of you for being on here with me, and I miss you guys so much already. Can't wait for the next thing. But you know, also just the exciting things to come. I mean, from Keep the Music Going Productions and Opera San Antonio, and you know, stay tuned for things at Austin Opera that we're going to be telling you about coming up soon. And you know, we can't wait to return to live performances and the magic of that. But in the meantime, rest assured that we're going to do everything we can to not only keep you engaged, but move the art form forward and ensure it has a really, really bright future. So thanks to all of you. And I also just want to say a special thank you to Melissa and Julie and Randa and Annie and Nate and everybody. There are a lot of people in this session right now who you don't see, but they're back. They are behind the scenes, literally in back there, you know, making all of this run so smoothly for us and for all of you. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for Conductor Cues, and we can't wait to see you again soon. And thanks again to my special guests. Be sure to watch Vinkensport, available on Marquee TV or at the Blue Starlite Drive-In November 8 and 11. Thanks so much, everybody. See you soon.